really good hashtag on there as well, real growth. So speaking of mosquitoes, here's to anyone who sits in the mud alongside the entrepreneurs of this world. Welcome to the afternoon session, everyone, if you're just joining us, day 3 of the GEC. Now, speaking of real growth, how's everybody doing? Good? Would you like to meet a real entrepreneur? Well, we've got good news for you in that case, because our next VIP guest is the founder of a phenomenal company called The Real Real. As luck would have it, we didn't arrange this. It is a happy coincidence. Her name is Julie Wainwright, and her book is all about how she built a billion-dollar business that rocked the fashion industry. So we really are honored to have Julie with us this afternoon. She's going to be in conversation with the managing partner of Roll Tack Ventures, Sarah Lerner-Mantel. And it gives us great pleasure to welcome this conversation to the stage, because it couldn't be more relevant and it couldn't be more important. Please welcome up Julie Wainwright and Sarah Lerner-Mantel. Julie, welcome.
Thank you.
Sarah, welcome.
Oh. All right. They've got us on a very tight schedule here, so we're going to be running everywhere. Hi.
Well, hi, everyone. Hi, Julie. Thanks for coming back to Indiana to have this conversation with us today.
Really happy to be here. I'd love to see more seats. Someone text your friends. Let's go. Let's get this going.
So diving into your story, you've had a lot of entrepreneurial success. Where did that spark come from?
Like many people, my father was an entrepreneur. When he was 29 years old, he started his own art and design business and had it until he started to retire. And he loved it. I have to say, one of the beauties of having a father who loves his business is it gets you, he was excited every day when he went to work. So it's a great atmosphere within a house when someone loves what they do and they take it. He started the business in his house. Just like I did with The Real Real, and then it ended up having a nice business in the South Bend, Indiana area.
Amazing. Well, what a great role model to have. Tell us about how you had the conviction to go all in when you knew that The Real Real was really something that you wanted to dedicate the next 10 plus years of your life towards.
Well, I don't know if you think that way, Sarah, when you start a business. I think every business starts small. And I think you guys have heard a lot, but you really need to listen very carefully into your consumers and test your hypothesis. Is it going to work? So I launched the business on about $250,000. And the first sale we had, we sold out in 10 minutes, gone. And we didn't have tons of products, so then it was like, okay, but if this is what happens in 10 minutes, if I focus on getting supply in, I'm going to be able to build a huge business. And also, it always helps to do the numbers. The first 10 minutes, we sold $30,000 worth of goods. So 30,000 times 30 days is $1 million, which means in my mind, I was on a $12 million run rate from the beginning, although I didn't have enough product to support it.
Interesting. So take me back on the other side of things with Pets.com. A difficult story towards the end. How did you know that time to move on and to close things down? How do you get there?
All right, so I don't know if we have people that have been alive for 25 years, but 25 years ago, there was the dot-com bust. And Pets.com had a little sock puppet that was emblematic it was our logo for the brand. The sock puppet was very, very popular. And Pets.com, I was the CEO. I was brought in to run the company. The market and financing crashed. I shut down the company. And let's just say it became the symbol of the dot-com crash, and I became the symbol of the dot-com crash. So you say, how do you know when it's time to move on? I didn't really have a choice, because the world, it was a very dark time during that time. There were other companies. So Pets.com was the precursor to Chewy.com, if any of you use Chewy.com. And other companies, there was a company called Webvan that lost $1.1 billion during that time. it shut down, but it was the precursor to DoorDash and Instacart. So
you were ahead of your time.
Well, timing, every entrepreneur knows timing's really important. And yes, we were ahead of the time, but we wouldn't have been if the financing window was still open, but it shut very abruptly after Amazon reported a quarterly loss of almost $1 billion. And the thinking was, by the markets, well, if they can't make money, how can these other little companies ever make money? So yes, it was a very, very difficult time.
That's unfortunate. But now with the Real, you're building this amazing business. You have this rapid growth. Talk to us about customer trust. How did you build that with a product that's such high ticket price?
Well, I'm going to go on 2 levels on that one. So first of all, I was raising capital for the business every 6 months. And just to give you an idea of the trajectory, the first time I raised capital, it was at 10 million in sales, where I raised real money from venture. The Real was a venture-backed business. It is now a public company. So I was raising money every 6 months. And when you talk about how you build trust, you keep the company going. Number 1, very important. And number 2, I already knew. So the Real, in case people don't know, and I see almost more men than women in the audience, most men don't know it, the Real sells luxury fashion. And they sell it for men and for women. And they're all pre-owned goods. So our goal was to get these goods to create a marketplace for luxury goods that had never been done before, and to keep these goods recirculating in the market. Prior to the Real, there had been a lot of counterfeits sold online, and a lot of counterfeits in brick and mortar stores, and it was mostly brick and mortar stores and eBay. So the goal was to elevate the experience and also add trust for the consumer by authenticating all goods. And we did that by becoming really experts in authentication, which took time, but there were certainly people doing it before we automated it. Now a lot of it's run through AI and machine automation and machine learning with human oversight. But when you first started, you hired experts and to authenticate, and gemologists. And when I left the Real, which was about 2.5 years ago, the company had the largest number of gemologists in the world on staff. Oh. The other thing is, if someone ever questioned the authenticity, is to make sure you give people good returns. But we were the first company ever to put a stamp on, we stand behind this, we will authenticate, and we were anti-counterfeit. What that meant for me personally, and also, if you sent us counterfeit goods, we would confiscate them.
Okay.
And we always had a little bit of vendor, and vendors would chum us. Anyone fish where you put out the, to get the, all right. So vendors would chum us. And what I mean by that is they may give us authentic goods multiple times, and then they send in a case of fakes, usually around the busiest time, which was Christmas. And without a fail, we would confiscate those goods, and then we'd get a letter from one of their lawyers. They all seemed to have lawyers that were brothers. Okay. All right, the counterfeiters have brothers, lawyers. We'd get a lawyer. And the worst case happened pretty early, where they literally sent thugs to my house to knock on the door.
Wow.
To serve me with this lawsuit. Which, by the way, the Real had multiple lawsuits from counterfeiters over the course when I was there. And funny, they never went to court. It's funny how that worked, yeah. And they never got their goods back either.
Interesting. You talked about raising capital and that you were venture-backed. I'll brag for her. She's raised over $500 million across your career.
A little more than that.
Incredible.
But right.
So you must have...
Sorry, not to be macho about it, but
it's impressive.
A little more.
Great. You deserve that. You must have some tips or lessons, takeaways from...
Look, there are multiple ways to build business. I was living in Silicon Valley. Venture is a way to go. I would say every no is a great way for you to learn about your business. And first of all, let me set the stage. Women get less than 2% of all financing, and it's declining. That should not be an impediment, but it's true. So what that means is every entrepreneur always gets more no's than yeses when they're out raising capital, but women get more no's than men. Having said that, a no's just good information. Because look, at the end of the day, a really good venture capitalist will tell you why they had concerns about your business. You have to not take it personally, listen to what they have to say, and it's all good information. And at the end of the day, you only need one yes. You only need one yes to keep going.
And speaking about these investors that you brought into your company, there's this balance between the capital you need to raise, but also they become your partners in the business. Talk through some great success stories of what you look for and potentially some red flags to look out for.
Look, guys, at the end of the day, the Real only had one term sheet every 6 months when I was raising. But here's an interesting phenomenon. You guys, if you do venture capital, there's a lot of seed funds. Those seed funds are now everywhere. Those seed funds can be the beginning of your company to get it going. They can also be the road to nowhere. So I think the key and this is true with the Real, when we first got our first Series A investors, they all had the capacity to participate in future rounds and support us. They also had connections that transcended their world, which meant that whenever I was out raising capital, they were there with me, they were making warm introductions, and they understood how to talk about the company and help close that. I never felt alone in raising capital. And so I would say, if you decide to go that route, yes, you want someone that's going to be constructive on your board. Most people want to be on the board. Yes, you want someone that has good business acumen, but remember, they're not running the company, you're running the company. But more importantly, they can't be an island. They have to be willing to work with you, to make introductions. They should have a good network and infrastructure around them, because you may think, oh, I'm just going to raise this amount of money, and maybe that's it. Maybe you're right. But if you think, when I was raising the Real, we went from running the Real, we went from 10 million to 50 million to 100 million to 250 million to 500 to 750 to $1 billion. You don't get there on air. I needed someone with me all the time, and they were always there. And that I did research. I think it's really critical. And if you do get money from a seed investor, make sure you understand their network for what they can invest later. A, important, but B, how they work in their world and how many other people they know. You want warm introductions all the time, not cold introductions. Warm introductions always work. They don't always work for money, but they always work for a meeting.
Gets you in the door. You were talking about that scale, that trajectory of the business. Talk through how you approach those different milestones. You were the founder throughout IPO. How did you think about building your team, and how did the strategy change as you grew?
The interesting thing when you're doing that, you really want people that roll up their sleeves and get stuff done. And all right, so I think someone else already talked about this, but I'm going to reinforce it. So one of the things, or someone should have talked about it, when you're a founder, the number one thing you have to worry about is your skill set and where your gaps are versus what you're trying to accomplish. So for me, I knew I wasn't cool and I wasn't a merchant. But I knew I was building a business that needed a great merchant and needed to transcend my own taste and look like a real fashion site. So my first goal was hiring someone with this skill set that I didn't have. And I felt it was critical to the business. That was another thing. This was critical to the business, and I didn't have that skill set. So I hired a young merchant. She shut her store down to join me, and she'd been written about on Refinery 29 and some other sites as one of the coolest merchants in San Francisco, the most progressive. And I'm like, she's cool, I'm not, I've got to talk her into joining me. And she had been through things enough that she understood the internet was the future. She had a little bit of consignment in her store, it was doing really well. She said, I'm young, I'll take a risk, I'll do it. All right, so that was number one, know your skill set and know where you are. After that, people in any case have to roll up their sleeves, get stuff done, and everyone knows that has either started a business or is going to, you do everything. You take out the trash, you negotiate with people that walk in the door, you hire, you do everything, you answer the phone. So get people that are well-rounded at the beginning. As the company matures, it became harder. And it became harder because what you want is someone who has maybe deeper skills in operations, but nothing about the Real Real. The Real Real couldn't call a merchant and get product in. We had product from multiple homes. Just to give you an idea of the scale when I left, we were getting in between 300,000 to 500,000 products every month. Wow. So they're not coming with preformed SKU numbers. You have to create everything. It's a reverse way of thinking about it. So then you need someone who knows how to run an operations center, but still has a curious, flexible mindset. And to be honest, sometimes that's a null set. So as the company scales, you want people with good experience, but if they can't be curious and still flexible in their thinking, it will fail. And that's the hardest thing when you take an idea that's original, that doesn't have a precedent, and then try to get people with deep experience, unless they do know how to play well with others, because all these businesses are collaborative, know how to be accountable, own their mistakes when they make it, and be really flexible in their thinking. These people will most likely get fired. And our biggest problem was always in the ops center, and I would actually fire one almost every year. Wow. Until we got to the right management. And we were talking before, she was at Wayfair. I used to talk to the Wayfair CEO about how they were doing it, and they were doing it as badly as I was. And she said yes, yeah. They just said they were making the same mistakes I was, and their issue was not reverse engineering an ops center. Their issue was a high growth company, and that's the other thing. If you're in a high growth company, you want to hire people that can keep the pace up. We were also a technology company, so you have to have someone that understands how to apply technology, not overbuild, and work in a very high growth environment. It's hard work, which means you hire and fire quickly.
And that's an important skill too as a founder, is knowing when is the right time to fire, which is a hard...
Not always. It's not always hard. I mean, sometimes you'd walk in there.
Sometimes you know.
Now, you'd walk in there. I have to tell you, we hired this top guy from Walmart, and I walked into the operations center, and he was at his desk doing something, and I'm like, these goods have been here for 2.5 weeks, they're not processed. He goes, oh, we'll get to them. I'm like, no, you have to keep the flowing. You have to keep it flowing. Anyway, he lasted about 6 weeks. So, sometimes you know when you know. And I think it's really important to hire and fire quickly. But that was an idea, bringing someone in who worked really well in a bigger environment with a lot of infrastructure, but absolutely you have to be hands-on in companies and high growth and startups always.
And speaking of that scrappy mindset, do you have any fun stories from the early days of when you had to roll up your sleeves?
Oh, we did everything. I'll tell you a funny story. We hired this woman who ended up running, the Real Real at the time I was running, had about 5% of their product was vendor, hence the thugs coming to my house with the counterfeit product. But about 5%, maybe for some Rolexes, some other filler products. So, but one of the people we hired to run it was an ex-banker, and she really wanted to be in this startup, and I thought, well, let's give her this piece of business. Well, unfortunately, one day she answered a customer service call. Okay. And it was someone who was very unhappy that we'd sold her shoes at a price she was not happy about. And the banker's saying, her name, I'm not going to give her name, but anyway, the banker, who's now a Real employee, is saying on the phone, you do realize you're this upset about used shoes. And I'm like, oh no, this is not good. So I started writing out cue cards, like say this next. And then I was holding them up like in the background, and then she would say it, and then I could hear, and then I'm like, now try this. And so I would say the thing you have to realize is not everyone should do all jobs. And we never let this person answer the phone again. Right. So, I mean, we got through that moment, and that person did reconsign, But I have to tell you, it was a bad moment. If I would have been sitting there, and then she gets off the phone, she goes, that was really tough. I'm like, you really didn't help it. You really did not help yourself.
I had heard with Wayfair, their co-founders, one of them's more nerdy engineer. In the early days, he used to answer the phone too and do customer service support. And
he needed a cue card holder.
He didn't have you there with the cue cards. He could have used that.
But I mean, look, you do everything. We put the desk together. You do everything. I mean, at one point, our photographers kept quitting because it was a hard job. And we made them do everything, and they were on a quota. And I was away trying to get a deal to get more consignment in, working with stylists. And Rati, who's now the president, said, what am I going to do? The photographer quit. I go, did he leave the camera? We own the camera. She goes, yeah. And I go, take pictures. What do you mean? What do you mean? We got to get those products up. She goes, oh, okay. So, I mean, you just do what you have to do.
I get that. So with the last minute of time, I just want to plug Julie's new book. Can you tell us a little about it?
All right, guys, look, if you're thinking of an entrepreneur or you are an entrepreneur, this is not just for women, although I am a woman, so it has a woman's sensibility in it. And men don't find it funny. Men don't find it funny. Women find it a little funny.
It is.
But it is how I built The Real Real. I didn't pull any punches. And oddly enough, Amazon's editors did just pick it as the best in nonfiction. There were copies out here somewhere. Yeah. So thank you.
So
first of all, wait, I do want to say my last 2 seconds, because I know we're on this tight schedule. If you're thinking about starting a business or you run a business, do it. I know it's hard. Entrepreneurs are the best people in the world. You end up knowing yourself better than anything. You're testing yourself. And I say more power to you. I don't care if you're building a big business or you're building a small business. It is like an honorable, great job. So just make it happen.
I love it. So following this talk today, if you go out into Gen Village in the center there, you can line up. There'll be free copies. This is an early release. It gets released next week officially on Amazon. So you'll get a copy. If you're there early, you'll get a signature from Julie, and we'll get a chance to meet.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Julie. Thanks.